In this video, I'm going to start to talk through the actual speech assignment. So for the persuasive speech, you're going to do a question of policy speech. And this is a speech that attempts to persuade the audience that something should be done, that a specific action should be taken to solve a problem. And as you remember reading, there are two types of policy speeches. And the first one, which is the assignment, is a passive agreement speech. So when you're aiming to get passive agreement, you're trying to get the audience to agree with you but not take an action. So for example, if you wanted to talk about smoking on campus, your goal would be to get them to agree that an action should be taken to solve the problem of smoking on campus, but you would not be encouraging them to take an action. So passive agreement includes speeches like CSN should ban smoking on its campuses, or the city of Las Vegas should turn vacant buildings into homeless shelters, or the United States federal government should ban sales tax, or the Clark County School District should require students to wear uniforms. Those are all examples of where you are trying to convince your audience that another actor, not them, should take an action to solve a problem. And that is the speech assignment that you need to be focusing on. The other type of policy speech is called immediate action. This is where you try to convince the audience themselves to take an action to solve a problem. So for example, you might try to convince the audience to start recycling, or you might try to convince them to stop smoking. Those are personal actions, but that is not the assignment. So let's just pause a second to be clear. The assignment requires you to do a passive agreement speech. So what you're going to focus on is how can somebody outside the room, somebody not you, somebody not in your audience, solve a problem. So if the problem is nutrition in schools, then you need to think about who is the actor that should solve that. And in Las Vegas, that's Clark County. So you would be talking about what the Clark County School District should do to solve the problem of nutrition. Now, an immediate action speech could be, if you have kids that go to Clark County School Districts, you should send them a lunch that you pack because then it can be healthier. That's not the assignment. Okay, now what we're going to do is talk about the main points of the speech. And so the first main point is where you explain the problem that needs to be solved. And a very simple way to understand this is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've all heard that quote. And so if something is not broken, you don't need to worry about fixing it. So if you just bought a brand new car, there's no way anybody's going to persuade you to buy another car because you just bought one. If your car is working perfectly fine, there's no reason to get a new car. So you have to prove that something is wrong in order to propose that an action should be taken to fix it. Okay, in addition, another thing that you have to do when you talk about the problem is argue that it is significant, that it matters that this problem exists. So depending on who your audience is and what you're talking about, they may or may not think a problem is significant. So a lot of times people are against local, like city or county taxes because they don't have kids in the schools. So their feeling is, why should I care about that? Why should I pay taxes since I don't have kids in the schools? So for example, let's say you're talking about food in schools in the Clark County School District. If you're simply talking about the fact that once a month they serve tater tots and you don't think tater tots are healthy, that's probably not super significant. If you're talking about junk food and vending machines in hundreds of schools that affects tens of thousands of students, now we've got significance. Another example of significance, global warming has many effects, and some of them are more significant than others. So whatever you talk about, in order to persuade us that we should take an action, you have to first convince us that this is another way to think about significant. It's a serious problem that affects people in an important way. So the Clark County School District doesn't take actions just on a whim. There has to be a real deep problem. So I'll give you an example. Recently, graduation rates for Clark County School District high schools were in the 60% range. That's a significant problem, and so they took steps to try to solve it, and they are improving. So that's a problem, and so you really want to find something that is very important. Another thing that you want to focus on are controversial problems. And what I mean by that is there has to be more than one real option. So, for example, if the problem you want to persuade about is people don't drink enough water, that's not really controversial. That's pretty much true. There's no debating it. There's no real contesting that people should drink more water. So you need to make sure that what your problem is and what your solution is are actually debatable, that there's people out there who would say no. So if you come up with a problem that everybody completely agrees this is a problem, then maybe we should talk via email to make sure that that's going to work for the speech assignment. Okay, and then finally, so what you're going to do in this main point is you're going to be doing research and writing a main point that talks about the problem, explains why it's significant. And one thing you want to make sure you do is talk about the problem specific to the agent. So let me give you an example. Every semester I hear at least one speech about school uniforms. And school uniforms, there's a lot of research out there. So you can do a school uniform speech where you say main point one, the problem. Kids are getting teased and bullied because they can't keep up with the latest fashions. And when kids dress in their own unique style, it distracts from education. That's the problem. Now, if your plan is going to be that the Clark County School District should require uniforms, then your problem main point has to be specific to the Clark County School District. So at some point you have to show kids are getting bullied because of their clothing. Or you have to show that in Clark County School District there are problems with kids wearing certain things that hurt education. Or you have to find some articles or some good evidence that shows this problem is occurring in the Clark County School District. So if your problem main point doesn't have any evidence specific to whoever is solving it, then that's not great. So let me give you another example. Let's say that you want to say the city of Las Vegas should improve their recycling with their garbage collection. Your problem main point has to talk about what's wrong with the current recycling options in the city of Las Vegas. So make sure that the problem and the solution are specific to the agent that you're talking about. If you're talking about smoking on the campus at CSN, you need to have evidence explaining how CSN specifically is having a problem with smoking. If you're going to talk about junk food in vending machines in schools, then you need to talk specifically about this happening in the Clark County School District. If you want to talk about that nationally, then your solution has to be a national solution. So maybe another way to kind of summarize this point about the problem, your plan and your problem have to be on the same level. So if it's a federal problem, it has to have a federal solution. If it's a state problem, state solution. If the problem is specific to the city of Las Vegas, you wouldn't have a federal solution. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this video. That's the first main point, the problem, and then I'm also going to discuss the solution in the next video.